Floppy disks have become so obsolete that their main recommended use case these days are coasters. And that is no fitting fate for a technology that is so cool. So today, we're gonna find a way to use floppy disks to launch modern AAA title video games. And we'll do it step by step so you can follow along at home. We'll have to solve 3 major problems to get this to work, the last being by far the most challenging. But the first is the fact that floppy disks only contain 1.44 megabytes worth of data on them. And modern AAA title video games are well above that threshold. In fact, for a 64 gigabyte game like this, we would need around 45,000 floppy disks to store that all. So yeah, that's a challenge. But even if we had 45,000 of these, how do you get a modern computer to run them? Thankfully, you can find 3.5-inch floppy to USB drives to exist, and they're pretty cheap. This is like 15 bucks on Amazon. Although I can't say I've ever used anything else from this brand. There's like a million knockoffs though, and they all should work. As we plug this drive into our computer, you can see it pop up in File Explorer, floppy disk drive right there. And if we were to insert a random floppy disk and then open up this drive, you can see that, yes, we can actually read that floppy disk. And I did buy this floppy disk on eBay, and it had a bunch of random data on it. So now the challenge is, how do we get it to launch something that is larger than it can physically hold? To solve this, we're gonna try to take a page out of Nintendo's playbook, because with their Switch 2, the cartridges don't actually contain the physical games. Instead, they're using game key cards, which gives you access to download the game and like a license to play the game. Which, while might be a bit controversial, I wonder if we can use that same approach with our floppy disks. Because realistically, there's no way we're fitting a large modern game on a 1.44 megabyte disk. So instead, we're going to take advantage of Steam's URL protocol, which is basically a way for you to launch games in your game library from a URL. For example, steam://run game ID $730 will launch Counter-Strike 2, assuming you own it in your library. For example, if we want to change it to launch Cyberpunk 2077, we can go to the store page. And if we come up here, you can see right after app, there's this number right here. In this case, 1091500. So if we change this number to 1091500, and now that's the Steam URL to launch Cyberpunk. Meaning if we can find a way for our floppy disk to trigger our computer to run that URL whenever it's inserted, well, hypothetically, we can launch that video game. But herein lies the next major hurdle. You see, prior to around 2010, you could plug in a flash drive or a CD or a floppy disk, and your computer would instantly run whatever was on it. Which by all means is a huge security violation. It's why you've heard that like not to plug in random USBs into your computer. For a long time, the default Windows setting was just to run the files on the drive plugged into your computer. Meaning malware or keyloggers or something else nefarious could just instantly pop up on your computer. And so Windows did make a change to not allow AutoRuns to work when you plug in something new into your computer. Which, while that is a good thing, it makes our project a little bit harder. So we need to make our own AutoRun program. While researching exactly how to do this, I found myself going down some pretty interesting rabbit holes, like how to take this USB stick and AutoRun a radio station broadcast for my baseball-themed cyber deck, which is not super relevant for right now, but I don't want to lose track of this cool research. So I'm using today's video sponsor, Zapier, to help bridge the gap between my research in Claude and my Notion database where all of my ideas live and are organized. With Zapier MCP, I can simply ask Claude in plain English to update my cyber deck idea note in Notion, and without swapping apps or copying and pasting, now all of my research is saved in my preferred spot. Plus, now I can even reference my entire Notion idea library directly in chat with Claude. And I have years and years of ideas and notes saved in here. So not only is this helping accelerate my research, it's also helping connect threads that I've completely forgotten about. I can even ask Claude, show me my Notion ideas that I haven't brought up in a while. I completely forgot about this. This would be really funny. Setting this all up is also way simpler than you would imagine. The entire process of using Zapier MCP to connect Claude with my Notion databases and even my Slack channels took less than 5 minutes. And now it saves me so much time and prevents headaches from me having to manually move my research around between tools. With Zapier, you can essentially connect any LLM that you're currently using with over 9,000 apps like Notion and Slack via the Model Context Protocol. So go build some super customized MCP integrations for your specific use cases with Zapier. I'll leave some information about this all in the description down below. But okay, it's time to go build our own AutoRun program for our floppy. We'll start by making a new text document right on our desktop, and we'll call it Floppy Launcher, just like that. So now if we open it up, we'll start by adding 2 lines. The first is to define where the floppy drive actually exists, which in most cases is going to be the A drive. And we can verify this by opening up our File Explorer to see that our floppy disk drive is located at A. Next, we're going to define a file to read. In this case, we want to look for game.txt. This is basically the file that we're going to look for on our floppy disk in order to launch our game. With that defined, now we need to add the bulk of the actual functionality. And I will leave a copy of these files in the description down below in case you don't want to type this all out yourself. But with this loop loop is doing is waiting for us to insert a floppy disk, and as soon as we do, check to see if we can find that file, that game.txt file. And if we do, launch the Steam URL with that Steam ID that is associated in that game.txt file. Now the important part is to save this as a PowerShell script. When you click Save As, it'll default it as a TXT file, but you want to go down to All Files, and then you want to type in .ps1. And then it'll look like this on your desktop, which if you run with PowerShell, you'll notice this PowerShell window does pop up, and I'll show you how to remove that in a little bit, but you'll also notice that your floppy disk drive should start trying to scan for floppy disks every few seconds. So now if we take a blank floppy disk that has nothing on it and insert it into here, well, expectedly, like no games are gonna launch. So instead, if we open up our floppy disk drive and inside of here create another text document and call this one game, now if we open up that document, we can add the simple line of ID equals and then the number. This is going to be the Steam ID of the game that we want this floppy disk to launch. In this case, 730 is Counter-Strike 2. So as soon as we save that text file, CS2 immediately launches, and that's because our script was actively running, which goes to show that this actually has teeth. So I'm gonna close that down and remove our floppy disk. Let's see now what happens if we insert this back into our drive. Well, as we plug it in, again, not touching anything else, will CS2 actually launch? And it does. Okay, this is really cool, meaning now all we have to do is repeat this process for floppy disks for as many video games as we would like to launch. And in this case, I have like 5 or 6 more, so let's go ahead and turn all of these into game launchers for our Steam library. Oh, and to stop our auto launching script, we can just Control-C and that'll kill the program. So now if we want this floppy disk to launch Metal Slug 3, which is in my library, again, we can go to the store page and then look up the ID of this game, 250180. And now we can insert this empty floppy disk into our drive, open it up inside of our computer, right-click New Text Document. Again, just call it Game, and then open up that document and type in ID equals 250180. Save and close. And then simply repeat with as many games in your Steam library as you want to. I also find it very fun to draw the logo of the game that these floppy disks launch. Kind of makes it a bit more personal. Sometimes the logos turn out a bit better than others. I also did consider buying stickers of the actual like cover artwork of these games to stick on the floppy disk up here. But that's part of the fun of having your own physical game launchers. And the other fun part is finding out a way to store your old floppy disk, which I will say is probably the biggest challenge of doing this, because I mean, my Steam library has hundreds of games inside of it. And if you really did want to turn every single one of your games into a floppy disk, well, you are going to run into, well, I guess like a pretty classic problem of just storage management. And so I bought a handful of retro floppy disk holders, and we're gonna see which one is most fitting for our project. Oh wow, this one even came with extra floppies. Oh, that's awesome. Very nice. I think this Fellows brand was pretty popular in the floppy disk era. You can kind of see this one pops open to reveal the floppy disks right here. So if we stash in our game cards just like that, now we have a nice compact storage for our games. Wait, that's kind of cool. Then you can kind of just flip through them like this. All right, that's feasible. Let's see if option 2 is any better. Oh, wait, these also came with floppy disks. That's kind of the cool thing about working with floppies is people are just trying to get rid of them. So they're kind of easy to accumulate right now. Oh wow, these ones are see-through. That's really cool. Oh man, you could even color code your floppy disk based on the game. Like I'm sure some game out there would look better on a green disk than like an orange disk, you know? But okay, this is also a Fellows container, and let's see, I'm pretty sure there's a way to, oh, that's so cool. You can pop open the games like this vertically. Whoa, wait, that's so cool. It's a nice cascading effect. And then hypothetically, you could look for your games just like this. Also, what in the world is this? California Egg Commission? What is this? I'm kind of digging this Cascade one, but I'm almost wondering then if I just need to put like a little label of what game is at the top of each disc, because then hypothetically, you'd be able to see it at a glance. Counter-Strike too. So now if that was inserted into our cascading storage, look at that. You can just see it right at the top. Ooh, that's pretty cool. Now I will say there are a few caveats of this system that make it, well, maybe not work super awesome all of the time. The first is you don't want to have to launch this program every time you open your computer. And so to bypass that, we can create a second script called startfloppyhidden.vbs. This is a Visual Basic script file. And inside of there, we just need 2 lines. Set the object shell to create object wscript.shell, and then the shell.run powershell.exe bypass file, and then wherever our floppy launcher file actually is. In my case, it's just on my desktop. Running this script will prevent the PowerShell from actually popping up, so you won't have that window that you need to get rid of later. And then to make our start floppy hidden always run whenever our computer is launched, we can go into our startup app. So if we go inside of there, we can just enable start floppy hidden to on. And then every time our computer turns on, well, this script will run, which will essentially run our floppy launcher script. And while this does work pretty effectively to use floppy disks as a game launcher on your computer, the other downside is, well, like just kind of the functionality of how we've had to hack this together. At least with my drive, you can hear it chirp every 3 seconds. There it is again. There it is again. And that little chirp is basically the drive checking to see if a floppy disk is inserted. And that of course is right here, this start sleep seconds 3 inside of our floppy launcher PS1 file. Because this needs to always be listening, it does need to check at some interval whether a floppy disk has been inserted. And at least with this drive, every time it checks, it makes a noise, which is kind of annoying. So if someone can come up with a better solution of either making that more silent or, you know, doing this all in a way that makes a little more sense, I would love to hear about it in the comments down below. Because I will say that launching games off floppies is a fascinating little project. And turning your digital Steam library into something that you can physically like move your fingers through is such a cool experience. So if anyone can help improve this process, that would be really cool. I will go ahead and just like leave all these files that I've created so far in the description down below so that you guys can just start tinkering with them as well. But with that, I've been Mr. Yeester, your tech tinker, and I'll catch you in the next one. Thanks for following along. Oh yeah. And in case you're wondering, we've just updated to Windows 11. Let's see if our setup still works. I feel like it should, but let's see what happens. And okay, it looks like the game is still automatically launching as soon as we put in the floppy. So it does work on Windows 11 as well.